What's up, guys? So this story is about Mark Zuckerberg, not the Mark Zuckerberg from Facebook. I do not know that guy. He's way too cool for me. This is about the real Mark Zuckerberg, okay? The Puerto Rican Mark Zuckerberg. So Mark's mother's name was Tammy, okay? And when Mark was born, Tammy was living a debaucherous lifestyle, okay? She had multiple boyfriends. She was always moving around. Whenever she thought it was going to work out with one guy, it just didn't work out. And then she'd go and she'd live with another guy. She was on Yahoo Dating, and so whenever she met a new guy on Yahoo Dating, they would always fly her somewhere. And so that's what she did. Like, her lifestyle was just meeting somebody, flying, living, splitting up, meeting somebody, flying, splitting up, and just constantly, okay? And it's not that Tammy was trying to play these men or Tammy was this evil woman. It's just Tammy was a junkie, okay? And so when on her profile, it was, she was into bowling, she liked camping, she liked hiking, she liked long walks on the beach. And so guys would read that and they'd be like, oh, Tammy seems like the type of woman that I'd like to spend the rest of my life with. Well, then once they fly Tammy out and they spend a little bit of time with her, the kid is okay. Okay, Mark's okay. The kid doesn't bother a lot of people. They're willing to accept the kid, in order to have a life and a new wife. Or the goal is to have a wife, for it to be Tammy. But when they start digging a little bit deeper into Tammy's lifestyle, they find that Tammy is highly insecure. She's schizophrenic, she's bipolar, she takes a lot of medicine, and you don't know if she's going to be hot or if she's going to be cold, okay? And whatever substance she's on sort of dictates the way she's going to act that day. So if she's taking her Ritalin as prescribed, then she's somewhat normal. But she usually doesn't take it normally. She usually crushes it up, puts it in a spoon, and slams it, okay? And when she slams it, she becomes a basket case, okay? She gets on the phone with people. She starts calling people she hasn't talked to in 10 years. And you guys know what I'm talking about. You ever gotten a call from somebody, you're like, man, I haven't talked to this person in years. And they just start rambling, and you're just like, this person's on something. Well, that was Tammy, okay? Now, deep down inside, Tammy was a good person. Tammy wanted to better her life, but she was just so depressed from years of child abuse, and her parents were like, they wouldn't hit her, but they would verbally abuse her to where she was like this beaten little child, to where if you said something to Tammy, she'd want to just curl up in a ball and cry and hide, because she was always getting picked on, and she was always told that she was no good and her life would never amount to anything. Tammy was... I just feel bad for her, because it's not her fault that she ended up the way that she did. And Tammy's lifestyle reflected Mark. So poor Mark, he never knew the way his mother was going to act. So Mark was always scared, just like Tammy. Tammy was always scared. But when Tammy did drugs, she became like this social butterfly. She could talk to anybody. But let's just get on with the story. So Tammy meets this guy, and this guy's name is Kane, okay? And she goes to live with Kane, and Kane is slanging. And he's not just slanging one thing. Kane is slanging a bunch of stuff, okay? But his main thing that he's slanging is black. That blackety black. You can heat it, you can beat it, you can step on it, and it is going to give you a rude awakening if you ingest it, okay? And that's the stuff that Kane is slanging. Well, Kane's doing good. He's got a car, he's got material things, he's got dirt bikes, quads. Well, this dude says, hey, Kane, he says, I want to get more than my normal amount. His normal amount was he'd buy a G, sometimes he'd buy a half a G. But the guy this day, he said he had just gotten paid and he wanted to buy a bigger amount. So, of course, Kane's like, yeah, no problem, I'll do it. So Kane goes to meet the guy, and obviously it's a sting, okay? The guy was working with the cops, and they bust him. Well, Kane goes into the jail, and Kane's never been to jail. So when he gets there, he doesn't know how to act. He goes to the toilets. He doesn't know that he's not supposed to use the other race's toilets. So he gets beat up for using the wrong toilets. Then he's on the phone. He uses the wrong phones. He gets beat up for using the phone. But what it is he should have told the other inmates, he should have told them, hey, it's my first time in jail. But instead he lied and said he did all this time. He did prison here, he did prison there. So when he started breaking the rules, everybody's like, well, he has no excuse for breaking the rules. He's done prison time. If he would have just been honest and been like, hey, it's my first time in jail, they would have given him a pass. But he was just trying to be like Mr. Tough Guy. Well, when he's in there, he has this cellmate, and the cellmate starts lacing him up on this thing in Colombia. Like, hey, if you can get away to Colombia, I can pack some stuff in your suitcase, and you can bring this stuff back to America, and we can get paid a lot of money. He was talking like $20,000 a trip. So anytime that Kane went to Colombia, he would have these false bottoms in the suitcase. The Puerto Ricans or whoever it was over there, they would pack a suitcase and he'd bring it over. So what happens is he goes over there, he stays in a nice hotel, and he's waiting for the guys to meet up with him so that they can, send him on his way. Well, the dudes don't show up. So he stays there in this hotel for like a week just waiting for these people, and he's like, he's nervous because he knows he has to cross the border. But he's also excited because he's partying, he's living lavish, he's staying in this fancy hotel, he's drinking Mai Tais and, all kinds of things. Finally, the day comes. The dudes show up, and these are some sketchy dudes, man. They don't speak English, and they're very rude, and all they do is say, give me your bags. So Kane gives them the bags, and they take some razor blades, and they carefully open up the suitcase. And they told Kane that they're only going to put so much in there. I think they said they're going to put a couple pounds. Well, this is way more than a couple pounds. And Kane's like, hey, man, you guys said it was only going to be this much. Why is it this much? He said, this is going to throw off the authorities when I got to go through customs. And the guys, like I said, they don't speak English, so they're not even really hearing what he's saying. All they see is this, this American freaking out. Well, Kane's got no choice. He's under the mercy of these people. So they sew up his suitcase, and they did a terrible job. Like, these dudes looked like they're like 2-year-olds putting the suitcase back together. You could tell like something was in there. You picked it up, thing weighed like 100 pounds with no clothes. Like, how is he gonna get through customs? But he's got to do it. He's already made the agreement. Like, the people in America are waiting, so he goes through with it. And he gets to customs, and the guy says, sir, can you open up your bag? And dude, Kane is sweating bullets. He's so scared. He opens it up, and there's a bunch of like clothes and women's clothes, and the customs officer picks up some women's underwear, and he says, and whose are these? And Kane goes, old habits, hard to break. And the customs officer's like, all right, zip it back up, man. And he actually lets him through. So Kane gets it. I couldn't believe it, right? Comes back to America, gets his money, right? And he goes to the Commerce Casino in LA. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with this place, but it's just a card room. They have poker, and they have high stakes poker. So Kane takes almost all of his money, right? He takes $20,000 and he buys into a tournament at the Commerce Casino for $20,000. The most retardedest thing he could ever do with his money. Like, there's 200 players, so basically it's 1 out of 200 that you're gonna win, and that's all your money. The way Kane's thinking is, oh, I can just go back overseas and pick up another package and bring it back. Well, yeah, I guess you could, but you got to risk getting caught and everything. So he buys into this tournament, and his first hand, he gets pocket aces. Okay? Pocket aces, for those of you that don't play poker, pocket aces is the best hand you can get pre-flop, meaning before the community cards are shown. And so he gets pocket aces, and the guy, Kane goes all in, and the guy calls him with pocket kings. So Kane's way ahead, right? He's got all his chips in there. He's about to double up. The flop comes deuce, 7, nothing. The turn, queen, nothing, right? Here comes the river. Boom! It's a king. Kane gets dusted, but Kane's still got a few chips left. He's not completely out because he had won a few hands before that. but he's like almost out. He's got almost no money. Well, if you've heard the old poker saying, all you need is a chip and a chair. So Kane takes the couple of chips that he has left. He goes all in because he's only got a couple blinds left. He goes all in and he wins, but not much. He's only still got a few chips. So then he just puts his money back out there. He goes all in, right? And he wins again, like with, he had like a 10 deuce. Wins again. So he just keeps throwing his chips in because he's got no other options. And he actually increases his stack, like actually gets it up. Well, the final table, there's 9 players. Kane makes it to the final table. And then there was 3 players left. Kane made it to the final 3. And then instead of playing to be the winner, what the 3 did is they said, hey, why don't we just divide, instead of one person taking the whole thing, why don't we just split it 3 ways? And they all agreed. So Kane ended up taking, what was it? Kane ended up taking $500,000 because the pot was 1.5 million. So Kane ended up getting $500,000. So he's got $500,000. He's not even thinking about going back overseas to bring drugs across. He's thinking, okay, I'm out of the game. I'm gonna use this money. I'm gonna give Tammy some. I'm gonna give Mark some. And so this is what happens, right? At this point, Mark is about 14 years old. And he gives Mark $50,000. He gives Tammy $50,000, and he takes the rest and he puts it in the bank. Well, all Mark has seen his whole life is people selling drugs, people doing debaucherous things. You know, he wakes up and sees his mother passed out with a thing in her arm. He sees pipes. That's all he sees. All he's seen is debauchery his whole life. So what does he do when he gets his $50,000? He sees the grown-ups. He sees what they're doing. And so he goes into this abandoned building, and in this abandoned building is where like all the dealers are at. And the reason why they're there is because if the cops come and the cops are like, hey, we know that this is your stuff, the guys can be like, hey, it's not mine because this is an abandoned building. This could be anybody's. So all the big time dealers are held up in this abandoned building. So Mark goes over and he talks to one of the dealers. He says, hey, I got $50,000. And the guy's like, get the out of here, man. You ain't got $50,000. And Mark's like, no. He says, I really got $50,000. The guy says, man, open up your bag. Let me see. I think you're full of crap. He opens up his bag, shows him the $50K. The dealer pulls him aside. He says, man, what are you doing coming up in here with $50K? These dudes will straight murk you for that amount. Mark's like, hey, man. He's like, I'm going to take a chance. He says, I ain't got nothing going on. The guy's like, you're 14. What do you mean you got nothing going on? He's like, who's your dad? And he's like, I don't have a dad. You know, I got a stepdad, and, you know, my mom's strung out. And so the dealer said, listen, why don't you move into my house? We'll take your $50K and we'll teach you how to invest it. And basically, he wanted to put him under his wing and be like a father figure to Mark. Tammy's flipping out, right? Tammy knows who this guy is. Tammy's like, Mark, if you go over there, they're going to kill you. And Mark looks at him as like a good guy, not like the bad guy. But Tammy looks at him like the bad guy. Well, what Mark didn't know was that Kane and this dude, they had beef from a previous transaction that had gone bad. So the way that Kane looks at it like, yo, this dude is trying to kidnap my stepson. And Tammy's pissed. So Kane is mad, and it causes like this chaos between this small group of drug dealing pimps, prostitutes, like this whole circle. It just causes a lot of chaos, and everybody's strapped, right? So Tammy and Kane, right? They get their straps, and their plan is to go over and basically take their son back at any means necessary. So that's what they do. They go over, they got a couple of AKs, and they run up in the house, and they're like, hey, I want my son back. And the dude's like, no, this is my son. And Tammy's like, what are you talking about? It's your son. This is my son. And Mark gets up and says, this is my dad now. And Tammy's like, what are you talking about, Mark? This isn't your dad. And Mark, this guy has treated Mark so good that Mark like really believes in his heart that this is my dad now. So the situation de-escalates, and they ended up sitting down at the table, and they called Uber Eats, and they got some pizza, and they just kind of like just sat around and talked it out. And after sitting there for a few hours, they decided, like, hey, the best option, the best solution for everybody, let's work together. We got all this money, we got all these things, we got all this work, let's start an empire. And so that's what they did. They just started all working together. And since Mark had been around all these crazy people his whole life, he had learned new things. He learned new hustles. He learned different ways to make money. And Mark was not afraid to hurt people. And so they'd go to Chicago, they'd go to LA, they'd go to Brooklyn, and they were just moving work. Stacking. Eventually it got the eyes of the feds, man, and the feds came in and they were trying to do a sweep, but they just couldn't do anything because they had no evidence on anybody. Eventually, Tammy gets caught drinking and driving, and they bring her in, and they said, Tammy, they said, we know what's going on. We know about your operation. We know about your son, Mark. We know about Kane. We know about the circle that you run with. Tammy, you're doing a lot of harm to the community. Have you ever thought about leaving that lifestyle and just turning away? And Tammy's like, no. She says, this is the only life I know. I was brought up into this. I don't know what else to do. And the officer was like, Tammy, if you don't change your life now, your son's gonna die, Kane's gonna die, you're gonna lose everything, Tammy. Keep in mind, Tammy's only there for a DUI at this point. And Tammy ends up giving up her son. She gives everybody up, and she agrees to work with the feds, and she agrees to set everybody up. And you guys are gonna have to see what happens in part 2.